Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of Galileo Galilei. He's a man whose discoveries literally changed our place in the universe, putting him on a collision course with the powers that be, and in the process, reinventing how we even think about truth itself. All right, let's jump right in. But here's the thing, we're not starting at the beginning. No, we're starting at the very end of a long, painful struggle with one of the most dramatic scenes in the entire history of science. You've probably heard this famous line, but it does move. It's this legendary whisper, supposedly muttered by a 69-year-old man who had just been forced to get on his knees and publicly deny his life's work. It was his final, quiet little act of defiance. And that man was Galileo Galilei. We're talking about the most famous scientist in all of Europe at the time. And on that day, he bent his head and swore that the Earth did not move around the sun. A truth he knew in his bones was real. So how on earth did this happen? How did the greatest scientific mind of his generation end up on trial for heresy? Well, to figure that out, we gotta go back and see how his completely new way of thinking put him on a crash course with 2,000 years of rock-solid authority. So let's rewind to his early days. This is where we see how this brilliant and, kind of defiant guy started making a name for himself by questioning absolutely everything everyone else just took for granted. So Galileo was born in Pisa. His dad sends him off to university to be a doctor, which, he wasn't really into. But even at 17, his brain was just wired differently. And one day, just a random observation in a cathedral led to his very first big discovery. I mean, can you just picture it? He's a teenager, probably bored out of his mind in a cathedral, and what does he do? He starts timing this big swinging chandelier using his own pulse as a stopwatch. And he realizes something amazing. It didn't matter if the swing was huge or tiny, it always took the same number of heartbeats. He'd just discovered the law of the pendulum and a totally new way to measure time. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Now he's taking on the big guy, Aristotle. For almost 2,000 years, everybody, and I mean everybody, just accepted that heavier things fall faster. It just makes sense, right? A bowling ball is going to hit the ground before a feather. But Galileo, he wasn't so sure. And this leads to that legendary story. He supposedly climbs all the way up the Leaning Tower of Pisa. He's got a heavy cannonball and a much lighter wooden ball. He drops them both at the exact same time, and the crowd below, they don't hear a thud. They hear one single wham. Just like that, with one brilliant public experiment, he proved Aristotle wrong. And he taught the world a new rule. What you can prove beats what old books say. Okay, so he's already shaken up physics on Earth. What's next? Well, he starts looking up at the heavens, and he gets his hands on this new gadget, a gadget that's about to change not just his life, but our entire place in the cosmos forever. Now, to be clear, he didn't invent the telescope, but when he heard about this Dutch magic tube that could make things far away look close, his mind just lit up. He figured out how it worked, built a way better version himself, and, while everyone else was thinking about spotting enemy ships, Galileo pointed his toward the stars. And what he saw was just absolutely world-shattering. The moon, it wasn't some perfect, smooth orb. It had mountains and craters. The sun, this symbol of perfection, had ugly spots on it. He saw Venus going through phases just like our moon. And most importantly, he found 4 new moons orbiting Jupiter. The heavens were messy, they were complicated, and they were definitely not what everyone thought. But out of all those incredible discoveries, it was one little number that was going to cause all the trouble. 4. On a single night, January 7th, 1610, Galileo looked at Jupiter and saw 4 little points of light next to it that had never been seen before by any human. And this was the real bombshell. He watched them night after night and realized, wait a second, those aren't stars. They're moons, and they are circling Jupiter. This was the smoking gun. It was absolute, undeniable proof that not everything in the universe revolved around the Earth. So with this discovery, Galileo basically had all the proof he needed to back up that wild idea from Copernicus, that the sun, not the Earth, was the center of things. And by championing that idea, he put himself on a direct collision course with the most powerful institution on the planet, the Church. And the pushback was intense. I mean, you had these powerful professors and church officials who just refused to even look through his telescope. Their argument was, well, if we can't see these moons with our own eyes, they must not be real. Some even called the telescope a trick, a device of the devil. And that's the key thing to understand here. This wasn't just a friendly scientific debate. By saying the Earth moves, Galileo was directly challenging religious doctrine. And in those days, that wasn't just being wrong. It was a crime. It was heresy. So things get serious. In 1616, the church officially bans the whole sun-centered idea and tells Galileo to knock it off. And for a while he does. He stays quiet for over a decade. But then, in 1632, he publishes this book, a brilliant defense of his theory, sure, but he also uses it to totally roast his opponents. And that was it. That was the last straw. And that brings us right back to that dark room in Rome where we started. The old scientist, threatened with torture, forced to get on his knees and deny the truth. He saved his skin, yeah, but he had to publicly disown the very reality that he had spent his life uncovering. So, in that moment, it looked like he lost. He lost the battle with the Inquisition for sure. But in the grand scheme of things, Galileo's real victory was so much bigger than any single discovery. See, he didn't just find new things. He gave us a whole new way of finding things. And this, right here, is his true legacy. It's not what he found, it's how he found it. This simple three-step process. 1, look at the world for yourself. 2, use logic to figure out what you're seeing. And 3, describe that logic with math. We now call that the scientific method, and he basically invented it. Think about it. Before Galileo, if you wanted to know how the world worked, you'd go read what Aristotle wrote a couple thousand years ago. That was science. Galileo came along and said, no, forget the old books. Look for yourself. Do an experiment. Trust the evidence. And he wasn't done being a revolutionary. He did something else that was huge. He stopped writing in Latin, the language of academics, and started writing in his native Italian. All of a sudden, anyone who could read could understand his work. He was bringing science to the people, turning it into a public conversation. So that really leaves us with one last big question to think about. Galileo's whole story is about having the courage to question the things everyone else thinks are obvious. So it kind of makes you wonder, right? What are the obvious truths we all believe today that are just waiting for a modern Galileo with a new way of seeing things to come along and prove them all wrong?